family. So you have some distributional aspects within the household, okay? It is proven that women are poorer in their households, okay? So that's another thing. And the time period. The time period is important. The larger the time period that you choose, that you select, the less variation there is going to be. So it looks a lot less dramatic, okay? So when we were measuring inequality during COVID, do you remember, it was horrendous because it was during 2-year period. So we could see all the changes. However, if we looked at the time period of 50 years, we can see a smoother line, okay? So you have to choose these 3 things before you start measuring inequality. So I'm going to start with the very basics, okay? And I'm going to start with the starting point is mathematics. Who loves mathematics? Yes? No? A little bit? If you're going to do business, economics, or development, you can't avoid them. So you think you have to start loving them, okay? So start having a love affair with maths because it's going to be part of your career for sure. So the aim of a positive measure, why do we call them positive? Because we don't make any assumptions if it's good or bad, okay? We're not going to say, oh, this is better. We like less people to be unequal. We like less people to be poor. We don't care. We just tell how the data is, okay? And the first thing is not producing a social ordering. That's why positive measures are good. So we're going to think about the frequency density distribution, okay? So how is distributed? And how do you construct that? It sounds very scary, correct? The frequency density distribution, well, it's very easy because you have a whole line, okay, of incomes. So if I ask you how much do you have in your pocket, and you say, I have 10,000, I have 5,000, I have 3,000, I have 50,000, and so on. I have the whole distribution, okay? And I'm going to order them from little to bigger. And I'm going to associate a rank, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's the density function. That's how I do it, okay? That's the first density function, this f of x I'm talking about, okay? So I have this density function, and I brought some pictures. This is the density function for the UK. Look at the shape. Does it look like a normal distribution? No, it doesn't look like a normal distribution because our lovely normal distribution is symmetric. Yeah. Yes. So this one looks like a log normal or a Pareto. That's how income and wealth is distributed in general. Because why? What you're looking at is that there are more poor people, so more people on the left, okay? And very little rich people. Yes? So you can see how the distribution is nice, no? So that's why we like maths. Okay, so if you think about sharing a cake, and I may do that at the end of our class to see what you think, how should we share a cake, okay? So the whole GDP is the cake, and inequality is how many slices there are. So obviously, Annie is going to say, I want the biggest slice. So I'm a lecturer. So she likes inequality, okay? Or she's going to say, no, I want that all my students have, and I don't have any, okay? So that's how we're going to think about inequality. It's like a cake, and how do we slice it? Think about the cake of Indonesia. It's huge, isn't it? How do you divide it? By provinces? Do you divide it according to education? Do you divide it according to merit? We're going to look at that as well. So this is an example. I use the income distribution of Indonesian households by this author, Fujiagos. So the paper is on the Padlet. So if you look at household distribution of total income in 2020, we have that the lower deciles from 1 to 4 represent almost 50%. So think about the distribution. I want you to imagine the distribution. 50%, so if I have the distribution here, it's a big mountain, okay? And then it goes little like that. So it's like a log normal distribution, correct? So I want you to carefully look at these two graphs, okay? So this is the UK for 2017 and 2020. So this is pre-COVID and during COVID. So let's look at what happened, okay? What happened with household disposable income? If you looked at the median and the mean, they are different in values, okay? But they are positioned in the same decile, okay? Between 5 and a little bit of 7, 5 and 6, both of them. However, the shape has changed, hasn't it? So in 2017, look at number 1 and number 2. The bars are a lot wider. Number 3 in comparison to 2017. Can you see it? Yes? So what happened? And now I'm going to ask you. You had a good go? So what can you say? And go to your phones or to your laptops about the 2017 distribution in contrast to 2020. There are more rich in 2020. In 2017, there are less poor. You can change your mind as well. There are 2 correct answers, okay? So there are more poor in 2020. So that means that there are more rich in 2020 after the pandemic. So those ones in the blue are correct. And those ones in the yellow are correct, okay? Other positive measures of inequality, okay? And here we go with very descriptive ones. Well, it's the mean, very easy. We talk about the mean. We talked about the income share, okay? A lot. So the relative share of income going to person I is X. So that means that YI is equal to N mu X1, Xi. So if I define the average of that, the total sum of incomes is equal to N times the average, okay? So if I want to compare how far is one, if I'm interested in distances, one of the main measures would be the range, which is the maximum minus the minimum. So I take the richest and the poorest in the classroom, and then I find out how much is inequality. What's wrong with that? What do you think is wrong with that? It doesn't tell me anything what happens in the middle, okay? It can be very extreme. I could have Bill Gates here and someone who is very poor, and the range is going to be huge normal. So it's a very bad measure, but it's used, okay? It gives you some ideas, okay, on how polarized is the society, how far the groups are. We also have the variance. The variance is a good measure, as you know it. You know, probably some of you are fans We also have the coefficient of variation. The coefficient of variation is very much used by the UN. It's a relatively good measure of inequalities in general. It's the standard deviation of a distribution divided by the mean. So imagine, again, the standard deviation divided by the mean. That means that the closer you are to the mean, the smaller the standard deviation. Therefore, the smaller the value of the coefficient of variation, it means there is less inequality. So that's a good thing. I'm glad I didn't miss the rest of the class. So I only lost 8%. No, I lost a little bit, but not so many. So that's good. Hope you had a good lunch. And we're back. So this morning we talked a little bit about inequality and poverty. And today we're going to talking about poverty and inequality, a general idea, and I'm going to give you statistics about the world. So I'm going to make you worried. So that's the plan, okay? So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about factors that contribute to poverty. So one of them, we're going to talk about gender. And if we have time, which I think we will, we're going to talk about child labor, okay? It's a very difficult topic to talk about, but I'm sure that we will all be okay with it. But it's difficult. I always send it here off because it's just hard, okay? So, is that working? You're working now? It seems so. So here you have all the material. We looked at it in the morning, no? We have a Padlet and we have all the material for the lectures and the lecture slides and readings and mini projects and what have you, okay? You can scan the QR or just go to this website. So just to summarize, when we talked about inequality, we talked about several measures, okay? So basically, we talked about unidimensional measures such as the Gini, the Robin Hood index, the range, the variance, the coefficient of variation, and the variance of logarithms. So those were measures of inequality, and that we said that we could apply it to any dimension we wanted. So we could apply it to income, we could apply it to education, measure years of schooling, we can apply it to health, we can apply it to safety, and so on. We also looked at the Human Development Index, that is a multidimensional index. And we said we liked it because, or some of you said you liked it because it's a general measure that includes inequality for several dimensions. In the case of the development index, it's health, it's education, and it's income, okay? And we said it was good, but there was a little problem with it. And we say the problem with it is that they are perfect substitutes, and we know health is not a perfect substitute of income and vice versa, okay? So that was one of the criticisms. Then we looked at the axioms. What did we wanted? We wanted anonymity, scale independence, population independence, and transfer principle. Then we talked about poverty, and we went through the headcount ratio. We liked it, but we say, it's a bit dull because we're just head counting, so that's a bit boring. And also, it doesn't tell me a lot about the intensity of poverty. The poverty gap is a measure kind of inequality because there is a bit of distance, the normalized poverty gap. But finally, with the severity index, we find how intense is poverty. So the severity index helps us understand how bad is poverty, okay? So that's useful. Then we looked at the Foster-Green-Thorpe index, which is just the generalization of all the previous indices. The SEN poverty index that includes inequality amongst the poor, the SEN Shorrock's index,
And the WATS index, and what we liked about the WATS index was that it can allow me to estimate the time of exit from poverty, and also that it takes into account the whole distribution, not only the poor and the rich. So that was useful. We also talked about the multidimensional measure of the health poverty index, and we were happy with it. And again, they're not perfect substitutes, but we thought, well, it's useful to have a measure that summarizes everything. So we were happy. We haven't talked about the poverty measurement axioms, okay? So we are going to ask poverty several axioms. So we wanted to be focused, okay? So the focus axiom requires that the poverty measure should be independent of the income distribution of the non-poor. Essentially, it argues that only the status of the poor should matter, okay? Symmetry, which is also known as anonymity axiom, it means that it doesn't matter who the poor are, okay? So if we have a poor and a non-poor and they switch places, nothing should happen to the measure. Replication invariance, it's a comparison with different size distributions. So I can easily compare Indonesia with the UK, even if Indonesia is 3.5 times bigger than the UK or more. Then continuity, small increments of income changes of the poor should not result in large changes in the poverty measure. And that only tells us how sensitive is a poverty measure. Remember, we were talking about the line, and there was a student sitting here, and he was moving places, okay, through the poverty line. It shouldn't be so sensitive. It should be a bit robust, because otherwise we're just attacking the people next to the line. And we need to attack those people or help those people that are at the bottom end of the distribution, correct? Okay, so those are the answers. There are different poverty lines, differences amongst countries. The international standard for measuring poverty or extreme poverty is currently $215 per day. There are other measures, $320 and $550. For the mini project that I gave you earlier on, that you have on the tablet, you will find all that you will have to download all the poverty measures, okay? Extreme poverty, but also not so extreme poverty at 320 and 550. Countries also adapt their own national poverty lines to reflect what poverty looks like relative to the average incomes in that country. In countries as large as Indonesia or Mexico or Brazil, we have not only a national poverty line, but regional poverty lines, because what is poor in Yogyakarta is very different what is poor in Bali or in Jakarta, okay? So that usually happens. Now, in general, it's about 60% of the median income. So you can define your own poverty line. And we had a discussion about poverty lines already. So the total poverty gap, do you remember that we estimated with our little example of two countries, and it was 60 for both of those countries. So for country, if I have to compare these two countries, country A and country B, the total poverty gap in country A is a lot larger than in country B, because this area is larger because it's deeper, okay? So it will cost a lot more. And that was one of the nice things about the total poverty gap, that we said it was the cost of eliminating poverty. So I know how much in pennies and pence or in rupees, how much it's going to cost me to eliminate poverty. Okay, so we should consider when you are measuring poverty is what we call the life cycle thesis of chronic poverty. So this thesis says that poverty is not static. It evolves and flows through the life cycle. And it evolves in a perverse way. So childhood poverty, especially in large families, would happen. Then when the individual starts working, it will be reduced. However, poverty comes back with marriage and family, and poverty increases at old age, so they're unable to work. So it's what we call the poverty trap, the cycle of chronic poverty, which is very bad. Okay? So if you can take your phones out and join me in some of the activities, that would be great. This time, your lecturers are here, so please get the answers right. I can wink at the right answer. Ready? Just two people, come on. Well, thankfully, there are no right answers because I'm just asking you for your opinion, okay? So relax. Excellent. So moving on. What's your favorite type of index? Is it unidimensional, multidimensional, or both? I think I am Team Green. Okay? I like them both because they serve different purposes. The multidimensional index is a super great idea, but however, I think we still have a lot of work to do on the mathematical aspects of a multidimensional index. And they serve different purposes. Both because sometimes you just need unidimensional, and we need unidimensional to produce the multidimensional ones. So, but whatever you like best. It's a very good summary, a multidimensional, and I can say that that's the ones you like. However, I'm going to make the question a lot harder now. Can you tell me in words what's the importance of the unidimensional index? Think carefully. It's good. It's useful. Careful here. Here you say income or expenditure. You can use a dimensional index to measure anything else. You can measure education, you can measure safety, you can measure life expectancy, okay? So it's unidimensional, it's only measure one dimension at a time, but it can be any dimension that you choose. Easy to do. Oh, okay. I hope so. It's comparable. Also, multidimensionals are comparable. Single aspect. Okay. It's not comprehensive. I agree. Not comprehensive. So, good points, all of them. So, what's the importance of, oh, my activity is not very well said because I wanted the word count, so I didn't make it. So the importance of the multidimensional index is that everything comes at a time, and the problem is substitution, okay? Now, I want to see with you the general picture of poverty. So I'm going to show you not only the slide, but I'm going to show you something else here. You should. Okay. So this is yeah, for the Zoom. Okay. So this is the World Bank data, and it's showing how there was a big decrease on extreme poverty in the world. So the plan for 2030, okay, the plan was to eradicate extreme poverty, that poverty that we really don't like, okay, the very extreme kind of poverty. And we were doing like really good progress on it. However, COVID happened and it stopped. But I just wanted to see how good it is, you know? Obviously, you were not born, but maybe your parents were born in the 80s and or 70s, maybe. And they have seen a big change in poverty. So let me show you how well Indonesia has done, okay? So if I go now and check Indonesia here, and I looked into the graph now, hopefully. So remember, you were giving yourselves a round of applause for the right answer. So there you go. Good, no? Sounds brilliant. There's still things to do. It doesn't mean that the job is finished. You know, there is poverty, and where there is poverty, where there, like Amartya said, where there is hunger, there is poverty, and that's the end of the discussion. But we should acknowledge how great countries do, and specifically East Asia is doing particularly well. So let's go back to my slides, maybe, and stop the discussion. You have all the links on the website, okay? So you can look at how it has changed and see how it has changed for the world. This is for the world, you know? 43.6 was the headcount ratio at 215 a day, and currently it's 8.4, so good. It's a good reduction. Now, today's global inequality of opportunity means that what matters most for your living conditions is the good or the bad luck of your place of birth. That is depressing. I'm going to go from good news to bad news. That is depressing because it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter whether you are a male or female. It doesn't matter if it just matters where you were born. That's the sad truth about it, okay? So one of your colleagues was asking me, why are we worried about inequality? Who cares about inequality? We do, okay? Because it's part of poverty as well. The inequality worldwide, and I'm going to go back into driving crazy, this lovely lady who's helping me. And we're going to look at I don't have it here, so we're not driving. So let's look at the general picture of inequality and the living conditions, okay? So let's think about aspects and dimensions that are important for measuring poverty. So mortality rate of children under the age of 5, okay? The global average is 3.9, which is good. In Iceland, it's 0.21%, so it's really low. But look at Somalia, it's 12.7%. Life expectancy at birth In Japan, it's 84 years. In the world, it's about 72. But look, in Sierra Leone, it's 52. I mean, I know that for you, 52 sounds a lot, but for me, it doesn't. I'm 53. So if I had been born in Sierra Leone, probably I was close to, okay? Look at the years of schooling. How long have you been at school? Think about how many years have you been at school? Probably 15, 16 by now? How long have you been at school? I mean, 27 years in formal education. Too long, okay? Wow. But the means of years of school, in average in the world, is low, okay? See how privileged you are, 8.4 years. Already you are above, okay? In Germany, the average is 14.1. So it means that most people finish high school. You already are above that level. That's good news. But in Burkina Faso, that is in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's only 1.5 years. So students hardly do 1 year of primary education. Okay? The expected years of schooling in Australia is 23 years. In Sudan, it's 5. So primary education. An average income. So average income in the world is crazy because the global average is about 1,800. In Central African Republic, it's 661, and in Qatar, it's 116,936. GDP per capita adjusted for price differences. Crazy, right? So that's when we know that inequality is a problem because it really depends where you were born. So if you were born in Qatar, you would do a lot better. If you were born in the UK, you would do a lot better. But if you were born in Sub-Saharan Africa, you have no hope. And that's absolutely unfair. So this is the regional aggregation, and we have data for regions in 2015 and 2018. A lot of data stopped being produced in 2018 and 2019 because there were no data during COVID, okay? So that's an inflection point that you're going to find if you try to do studies on this. So poverty lines, headcount ratios, severity index, okay? The severity index is really high for Sub-Saharan Africa, if you compare it, okay? And the number of poor. So look at here, the number of poor in Sub-Saharan Africa compared to East Pacific. What is the composition of wealth? Wealth is composed by produced capital, natural capital, and human capital, correct? You are now investing on your human capital, that's fabulous. And there is natural capital and produced capital. So look at it. High-income countries have higher produced capital, and low-income countries have high natural capital. This is no news to anybody, but that's how it happens. The nice thing is that it's a constant increase on human capital, okay? So even in low-income countries, when it only represents 41%, it's still a good proportion of capitals. That's not bad. Global wealth has grown, but at the expense of future prosperity. Countries that are depleting their resources in favor of short-term gains are putting their economies on an unsustainable development plan. While indicators such as gross domestic product are traditionally used to measure how good the economy is growing, the report argues the importance of considering natural human and produce capital to understand whether growth is sustainable. And we're talking about this because of the changes in the environment as well. According to the report, global wealth grew significantly between 1995 and 2018, and middle-income countries are catching up to high-income countries. I think Indonesia has done a little shift, yes, from low income to middle income. So that's really good news. Low and middle income countries saw the forest wealth per capita decline. This is one of the issues. Meanwhile, the value of global marine fish stocks collapsed by 83% due to poor management and overfishing over the same period. The projected impacts of climate change may exacerbate these trends. So I want to show you a little movie on YouTube about what were the new ideas about poverty. Yes. I'm so glad I have some help.
The world has made tremendous progress in reducing extreme poverty. But this progress has slowed down and is uneven. If this trend continues, the world will not be able to end extreme poverty by 2030. However, the extreme poverty picture shows an emerging divergence. While extreme poverty is still stubborn in some low-income countries, several others have made rapid strides in moving people out of extreme poverty. But that doesn't mean poverty is completely eradicated in those places. That means to make poverty history, we can't only rely on historical ways of measuring poverty. We are introducing higher standards for a growing world. Also, as countries grow, their outlooks of what constitutes basic needs vary. While in one country you may need just clothing and food to find work, in another you may need a cell phone, a car, and access to internet in addition to food and clothing. Introducing a societal poverty line that combines extreme poverty, which is fixed, and a relative dimension of well-being that differs from country to country. But poverty isn't all about money. To get a full picture, we need to understand that deprivation comes in many forms and use a new, multidimensional measure that not only considers income, but also education, electricity, water, and sanitation. Finally, to expand our understanding of poverty, we need to go inside the household to learn how resources are shared. Globally, 104 women live in poor households for every 100 men. However, to know how many women are poor, we need to know how resources are shared within households. This requires more investments in survey research. It is possible to strive for a world in which all regions, countries, households, and people experience the benefits of poverty reduction. But for that, we need to piece together the poverty puzzle to understand its full impacts.
So I like this video a lot because it's a summary of what we covered already. So we've been talking about the Maslow's pyramid of needs and what was basic and the poverty lines and how gender and other demographic factors are important. So it's one of my favorite things to show. I also have on the slides this the World Bank goal. Okay, so how did COVID affected poverty? So let me show you some statistics on this. So here we can see poverty, historical projection of poverty. So as you can see, it was 2019 when someone told us we have to wear face masks, and things changed for everybody. You were probably still in high school, some of you at university, I don't know. But you can see it was 2019 and there was this projection of up to 8.4, okay? And guess what? We went back about 10 years in time and the projection increased. So COVID had a great impact on poverty, like great impact, not a little bit, millions of people changing their lives. I really like this website. If you have the chance to look at it, you can choose per region. So you can choose Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and see where it has a bigger impact. So, as summary, global extreme poverty has increased in 2020 for the first time in 20 years as the disruption of COVID. The pandemic pushed an additional 88 million to 115 million people into extreme poverty this year, with the total raising from as many as 150 million in 2021. The pandemic and global recession may also cause some issues. As you can see, we're all paying for what happened, right? So there is recession worldwide, there are some issues with inflation, some countries are doing better than others, but in general, we're all struggling a little bit. So absolute poverty, the extent and magnitude, there is progress on extreme poverty. A bottom billion live under $1 per day head count. There is clean progress on 1.25 per day head count, and is not very clear progress on $2 a day. There is incidence of extreme poverty and it's uneven. The relationship between economic growth and poverty, we looked at the Kuznets curve and we say that sometimes it's needed in order to generate growth. And there is this association between growth and poverty reduction. When it is inclusive, growth reduces poverty, but lower extreme poverty may also lead to higher growth. So here are some graphs about how things have been evolving. And you can see that South Asia and East Asia and the Pacific are the biggest contributors to the reduction of poverty in the world. However, Sub-Saharan Africa is doing badly, really badly, so we're worried. Absolute poverty and magnitude. So this is the total population living in extreme poverty by world region. So you can see Latin America, East Asia, South Asia, and again, our bad element here is Sub-Saharan Africa with increasing extreme poverty. What are the causes of persistent poverty? So the causes can be at many levels, okay? So we're going to cover national, regional, community, household, and most of them are all dependent. So there are three big players into explaining poverty. So the theories, we call them the three tigers. So these big players are the Sachs thesis, and Sachs says that geography is the problem. So the productivity of the soil, the weather, vulnerability, being landlocked, diseased environment, and natural resources. So according to Sachs theory, all the problem is geographical. So I personally don't like it because you have no choice, right? You cannot do anything. So if you're in Central Africa, that's it. Forget about it because you are landlocked. There is low productivity of the soil and so on. Acemoglu says that the problem is the institutions. The problem is man-made. Think it in terms of the pillars of a pyramid, where the base layer reflects those conditions which facilitate investment. Peace, stability, the rule of law, absence of conflict, absence of corruption, and the importance of investment is what really derives growth. So that's another thing that actually how you're going to be able to defeat poverty, it depends on the institutions. How strong are the institutions? Collier's thesis says that it's a combination of geography and institutions. He says that there is a conflict trap, that there is a natural resources trap, but they can be landlocked with bad neighbors. Like I feel a lot about Mexico, the relationship that we have with the US is a love-hate one. So that's one of the issues. And you may also have the problem of bad government, correct? So it's a combination of both. So I would like to ask you, which is your favorite one? Which theory do you think better explains poverty? Okay, so nobody likes sacks. Bless him. I don't like it either. I think I'm in between. I'm with you. So either one or the other. I think I like Collier because a lot of it has to do with natural resources, but it has to do with institutions. So here is where you become an economist, okay? So it's not a matter of pace. It's a matter of what the data can give you. So this could be something that you can test in your thesis or projects or dissertations or papers or something and see actually what is the data telling you. If it's just natural resources, is it just institutions? It's always very useful to blame the big brother, no? To blame the government. They are evil. So we don't know, but this also probably has to do with resources itself, natural resources. So it's something that you can actually find out. What are the causes of persistent poverty at regional level? At regional is the resources, the climate, the conflict, the geography, the free and fair judicial system, the ethnic fragmentation, infrastructure, like transport costs, and so on. At community level, again, your infrastructure, your employment opportunities, the social networks, and the ethnic issues. And at individual and household levels, it could be demographic, economic characteristics, social characteristics, the household size and the structure. Household size is very important. Fertility rates and child labor. In many ways, they are all interlinked and they're very difficult to separate and say one is national, one is regional, one is individual. They all behave in interlinked. So when you do poverty analysis, you have to look into health indicators that you're going to do in the mini project, such as mortality rate, malnourishment, costs of death, education, such as literacy rates, years of schooling, living standards, lack of electricity, access to clean water, sanitation, flooring, and macroeconomic indicators such as the GDP per capita, the gross national income, and the population size. So all these are aspects that you're going to look at when you look at poverty. Now I'm going to move into gender. Why do you think is reducing gender gap important? Or do you think reducing gender gap is important? It usually results in better health care. Better educated mothers tend to have healthier children at any income level, okay? So it doesn't matter if you are in a high income or low income, if mothers are educated, there is better health. So you're talking about positive externalities. Education, especially of girls and women, is important because while some mothers who are knowledgeable about healthier lifestyles play a crucial role in reducing the risks of their family's health. As we said, children are healthier. If children are into child labor, they can quit child labor. It helps businesses. It increases the GDP. It decreases birth rates. Contraceptive use is 4 times higher among women with secondary school than amongst those with no education. And it helps to destroy this poverty life cycle. So, one of the Millennium Goals also that we wanted to achieve was to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women. And guess what? It's happening. So that's really good news. So in Southern Asia, only 74 girls were enrolled in primary school for every 100 boys in 1990. In 2015, 103 girls were enrolled for every 100 boys. Okay, so good change and fast change. Women have gained ground in parliamentary representation in nearly 90% of the 174 countries over the past 20 years. The average proportion of women in parliament has doubled. Between 1991 and 2015, the proportion of women in vulnerable employment as a share of total female employment has declined 13 percentage points. That sounds good, okay? And in contrast, vulnerable employment among men also fell by 9 percentage points. So for women, 13, for men, 9. But it's good that both are falling because they should be in vulnerable employment. So literacy rates in the world. So the first graph in blue is 2015, and this is 2020 from the World Bank. So you can see how different the story is, okay, from 2008 to 2020. So only a decade of difference, you can see how it has changed. And women are pushing, yes, and pushing really strong. And I can see some smiley faces at the back saying, yes, we are. And I agree, okay? So that's good news. So gender and poverty. In most developing countries, poverty is becoming feminicized, resulting in an increasing proportion of those considered to be poor are women. So that's sad, okay? So a lot of women are still poor because they don't work as much, and we're going to see why. More often, they are in part-time or seasonal, low-skilled, informal local jobs because of 2 reasons mainly: women's reproductive role and the role of childbearing. So that's one of the main reasons, which is physiological, and there is another reason, which is social. So women's primary social role is a family support, wife, mother, nurse, teacher, cook. So this is more social than physiological, okay? So then you're going to give me ideas on how to talk about this, okay? So women's work or women's employment is a wide range of tasks. There is very little control over productive resources or even their own income or labor. In sub-Saharan Africa, subsistence agriculturally essentially are a female activity. Food production, as well as processing, marketing is also female responsibility. Women's wage, because they are not so educated, they don't go to formal unemployment, and they often choose short-term training because they have other responsibilities. They are not so valued because there is frequent absence from workplace, and because they have to look after their children. Children have chicken pox or something, so they have to be absent. Social and economic roles are blurred, they overlap, and they are not so mobile because they work alongside childcare, and political status is somehow restricted. The gender gap in education and health. Young females receive less education than young males in nearly every low and lower middle income developing country. Closing the educational gender gap is important because the social return of women's education is higher than of men in developing countries. What does that mean? Women have a higher social return. Okay, so whatever they do is going to have bigger impact. Education for women increases productivity and lowers fertility. Educated mothers have a multiplier impact on future generations. Education can break the vicious cycle of poverty and inadequate schooling for women. Now, good news, the Millennium Development Goals is on parity being approached. Progress in every developing region. So it's happening, okay? So it's a conversation that in probably 10, 20 years, it's not going to be a problem. Your children are not going to cover this topic in school. How amazing. So how do we measure gender inequalities? Okay, so here comes the UN, and there is something that we call gender inequality, the Gender Development Index. And it's an index such as the Human Development Index, but it divides and it creates one for men and one for women. And that is useful. So we can have one for each. And it has the three elements: knowledge, healthy life, and standard of living. Measure of gender inequalities also there is a measure that's called the Gender Empowerment Index. Gender Empowerment Measure, and it evaluates progress in advancing women's standing in political and economic forums. This concerns with those that use capabilities to take advantage of the opportunities. So let me show you where we are. There is not a lot of data for Indonesia, but there is some. So obviously, if I go to the top, the highest gender empowerment measure is Iceland, and then there is Norway, and there we go. I think it's the only place where Mexico does a little bit better than Indonesia, so I'll show you, of course. So Mexico is ranked 46. So we're not doing so fabulous, but we're doing. And what happens in Indonesia is that we don't have data. So we don't have data for the empowerment index yet, but probably we'll have it soon, okay? So you can check this out. Okay, so I'm going to carry on. I'm not going to give you a break because I'm hoping to go through all my lecture notes and finish and then let you go early. Is that okay? People on Zoom, is that okay? So how to and I missed the word, how to reduce gender inequality. So please remember all the answers are anonymous. Just tell me, what would you think would be useful to reduce gender inequality? Because it's always, in my opinion, it's always so based on women and what women should do, what women should do, and study more and work more. And so, if you have any other ideas, I would like to hear. Okay, so I'm going to comment on some of them. Women's education, definitely. I like it, but I also think a change in men's education too. Because it's not like women study more. It's like the content should be also for men. Men should also have go into education and know that women's participation in society and employment is very important because their children are going to be better. So there should be a change on the speech for male education. So that's something. Equal access to education, yes, we take it for granted, but it's not that obvious. It happens. It probably happens here, but we don't know if it happens in many other countries. I particularly like this comment, whoever did it, I like it a lot. Enhance the role of women in domestic, productive, and community aspects. So that's absolutely true. But also remember, it's not only that, it's not all the job of women. We can only do it as team, all together, a community, right? Empower women. Yes, we would like to empower women, but the empowerment comes also from our other team members, no? Males. So empowerment needs to come equal both for male and females. Wage differences between females, it, it's terrible, no? The wage gap is just too large. So how are we going to do it? So I had a student who did a dissertation and tried to find out what was the driver of gender pay gap. And she found out that it was geographical, that it didn't matter what you studied, it didn't matter what you did as a woman, it mattered. If you were in London, you were probably going to get the same wage as a man, but if you were in Northern England, you were not. So it's probabilistically, and that should change because it should matter how much you study and how much you do. Okay? So excellent points. I think you are ready to advise your government and the UN on these issues. It's good. And last, I'm going to talk about the topic that I hate and I love, and it's one of the most difficult topics to talk about, and it's child labor. Okay, it's not talked about it because it's such a sensitive topic, but we are going to talk about it because it's one of the drivers of poverty in the world. So widespread poverty creates conditions in which the poor are unable to finance their children's education. So the main causes and results of poverty in the short and long term are that the household and economy level is child labor. Child labor is nothing new, okay? It happened during the 1800s in Britain during industrialization, okay? So you can remember this movie, Oliver Twist, okay? Child labor is not like a new thing. It has happened in all possible situations. The determinants of child labor, living standards. So when there are some good news, when household income increases, child labor is reduced at both household and country levels. So children only work because there is this huge drop on income. Otherwise, when there is income, the parents say, you're not working anymore, come back to school, come back home. And the countries do exactly the same, okay? So as soon as there is more income, this stops. However, you will see it's not happening just yet. Children work only if consumption drops at a minimum level, and as income increases, they work it. So I'm going to go through the definitions of child labor according to the UNICEF State of the World of Children report, and it says that children between the age of 5 and 11 that work 1 hour of economic work or 28 hours of domestic work per week. And think about it. Of course, you say 1 hour of work is nothing. Yes, it's okay. It's nothing. Between 5 and 11, probably, I was selling chewing gum to my friends at school for an hour. Yes, that's absolutely acceptable. It's not a problem. But 28 hours of domestic work per week, it's slightly excessive when you are 5. Okay, so start thinking about that. At the ages between 12 and 14, 14 hours of economic activity or 28 hours of household work. Between the ages of 15 and 17, 43 hours or more of economic or domestic work per week. So it's work, okay? So the ILO's Statistical Information and Monitoring Program on Child Labor says that economically active child under 12 who works 1 or more hours per week, an economically active child of 14 and under who works 14 hours per week, or 1 or more hours per week in activities that are hazardous by nature or circumstance. And we're going to go into hazardous work. Okay, and we're going to define it. A child 17 and under who works in an unconditional worst form of child labor. This is trafficked children, children in bondage or forced labor, armed conflict, prostitution, pornography, and illicit activity. What a disgrace, right? So the ILO estimates that there were 152 million child laborers in the world. 152 million, okay? In 2016, under this definition. 218 in 2004, 151 in 2016, and in 2022, an estimate of 206 to 198 million. So it went up after COVID, and this is a statistic that is not common to hear, because we are so embarrassed as humanity, we don't talk about it. Okay, so hazardous work is what we were talking about. Children in the worst form of child labor and all forms of slavery, sale, trafficking of children, forced compulsory labor, including forced and compulsory recruitment of children for use in armed conflict, prostitution, pornography, pornographic performances, the use of procuring or offering of a child in illicit activities, trafficking of drugs, work which by its nature or circumstances in which it's carried out is likely to harm the health, safety, or morals of children. This is hazardous work. Okay? So the child labor statistics show that 9 million additional children at the risk of being pushed into child labor by the end of 2022 as a result of the pandemic. 79 million of those children are in hazardous work. That's poverty. So when we talk about relative and absolute poverty and extreme and income and this and that, yes, we're worried about it. And we're worried about this poverty. We're worried about when children have to be in this position. Okay? So it has terrible effects. And it has effects on education because, of course, these children do not go to school. When they go to school, they fall asleep. If they don't fall asleep, they haven't eaten. So how are they going to learn anything? So these child labor statistics are just heartbreaking. I always feel love when I teach this. But I always think that it's something that we need to mention because I can tell you, they received absolutely no propaganda. Nobody's talking about it. We should all be super embarrassed and be working for this, no? To reduce this type of child labor and this type of poverty. But it's not, because we're more worried about other things. But this is what's been happening. Now, the incidence of hazardous work in countries affected by armed conflict is high. So not only they are in terrible ways of work, but some of them are just getting to conflict, armed conflict, okay? And I say it because it's happening a lot in my country with the drugs of war. Children are very much into these kind of things. 30 million children live outside the country of birth, which increases the risk. So with all this migration that is happening in the world, 30 million of these children are living outside the country of birth, which is super difficult. So these are the metrics, okay? The global progress against the child labor. We were doing okay, but from 2016 to 2020, boom, there was a big increase. So that needs to change. Sub-Saharan Africa, again, is a big contributor. Latin America also, but Asia is interesting because Asia and the Pacific still has a good proportion of child labor. Not so high on hazardous work, but child labor is happening. In Latin America and in Europe is more or less the same level for hazardous work and child labor, okay? So these are some of the statistics. This is surprising because the child labor is more prevalent amongst boys than girls at every age. Okay, so there are more boys in child labor than girls. The agricultural sector accounts for the largest share of child labor worldwide. Agricultural work for children is still a tragedy, okay? But it's not the worst type of child labor that there is. So if they're going to be working with the parents in the land, it's not, in my opinion, it's not a biggie, okay? It's not a big problem. So over 1/3 of children in child labor are out of school. And that's one important thing. So it has an important impact on education and then on health. And then on top of that, if they're girls, you know? So the major findings are that 160 million children worldwide are engaged in child labor. 63 million are girls and 97 million are boys. 79 million children, nearly half of those in child labor, work in hazardous work. Almost 1 in 10 of all the children in the world are engaged into child labor. The global picture must continue progress against child labor in Asia and the Pacific, the Latin America and the Caribbean. In both regions, child labor trended downward over the last 4 years in a percentage. But child labor is most common in sub-Saharan Africa, where more than a third of children work. There is no progress in non-emerging markets. So as a country develops and grows, so child labor declines always, okay? Now my question here is, do we have to wait for economic growth and development to witness a decline on child labor? Do we need to wait for these conditions to be achieved to reduce child labor? So the motivations for child labor over than poverty. To gain, some children want to gain economic independence from their parents, or that's what these papers say. They also, because school attendance affords the child this utility that dominates this utility from work. So for those of you are too young to have children, but if your children say, I really don't want to go to school, and your parents push you to go to school, that's a good thing. But they say, but if I work, work is probably better than going to school. Well, it's not. So that's one reason, and there are papers that prove that, okay? They want to acquire training, which is not a bad thing. A number of studies find that working children contribute a very substantial fraction of the household income. For children in wage work, the average contribution of boys is 30%, and the contribution of girls 15%, which is rather substantial. Therefore, as you increase disposable income, child labor is decreased. A way into looking at this non-linearity of income elasticity of child labor is that it has been the center of debate regarding both its causes and the policy instruments to address it. For any given transfer size, there is a critical level of household income below which an increase in income has no impact on child labor and education. The consequences, well, apart from morality, and that with any entry into the labor force, school is terrible. They don't complete basic education or never go to school. In addition, for girls who labor and in school, they carry a triple burden: housework, schoolwork, and work outside. The home paid or unpaid, which inevitably reduces their educational attainment and achievement. And to end child labor by 2025, we need to progress 18 times faster than we did between 2000 and 2020. So chop, okay? Big job, but those children need us, and it's a thing to do. This is your reading list. And now, since I'm so very fast, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions, complaints, or anything else.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, first let me introduce myself. My name is Zaki. I'm an ultimate student, and I want to ask a question about the gender inequality. But yeah, I want to give a disclaimer before, because maybe this question originates from my lack of knowledge about ethnic. I just want to clarify the fundamental idea from gender inequality. I want to ask about the true definition of the gender inequality because, as we know, like women and men is totally not totally, but it's literally different from many aspects. Like, yeah, for example, we are
Have children.
like for example,
You can have children, but you cannot get pregnant.
and there will be this is not an offensive question, but I just want to ask, like for example, we are physically different, but maybe it might be make us uh, different. Maybe like yeah, it makes us different from job opportunity and like the perspective of occupation and others. And yeah, I just want to ask
Okay,
the true
so
definition.
excellent question. Is absolutely true. So we're different. Yes, we're different. And we talked about it in the lecture. We say there are these physiological things like we can have children, and that is a privilege and a limitation at the same time. So, and you can't, and that is a privilege and a limitation at the same time. So that's when we were talking about the limitation. It's not only empowering women and doing exactly the same. It's about not equality, but equity. With different ways of being, we can be equitable, okay? Because, for example, women may need lower hours of work. That should be okay because we need to look after the children, or we need to get pregnant and have kids, and and the competition of having to be the same is not, that's not the purpose of the exercise. We're not looking for equality, we're looking for equity. And women empowerment is really important because the women go to school, the children that are the children, not only of the women, but also of the men, are going to be better off. Because some of those children are going to be men, some of them are going to be girls, right? So the whole idea is to achieve this teamwork. I disagree with sometimes that women need to get more educated, work more, this, that. We cannot do more, right, girls? It's a triple burden. It's like working and having kids and doing this and that. It's impossible. Okay, so it's a team. So that's why it's not only the education of women, it's also the education of males and the change of tone and the teamwork to make life better for everybody. Because if women work, there is higher GDP, it's better, it has better externalities because there's more education, everybody's happier. So it's a sensitive topic, and I can see your point, but I don't want to be crucified by my classmates. But yes, it's reaching equity rather than equality, because we are definitely not equal. Good point.
Thank you, such a question.
No problem. So, any more questions? Yes, here and then.
Hello, Ms. Maria. First of all, I would like to thank you for your lecture. My name is Paldi. I'm from Economics major, batch 2021. I'd like to ask you a question, but it's I think I'd like to provide a story first. So a few days ago, me and my friend, we conduct a discussion regarding one question: is which of two aspects that can be removed from this world? Is it inequality or poverty? Okay, so I myself am have a perspective that we can remove inequality from this world, but not about poverty. And my friend think about different. She has a different perspective. what I like to ask you about is what is your position regarding that question? Is it inequality or poverty? Thank
This
you.
is a big question. This is a big question. I think poverty for me. For me, if I was like, if I find the lamp of Aladdin and I had 3 wishes, I would start with poverty, extreme poverty. Because inequality, I don't think it's a major concern. It's not nice and it's not good for the economy. It's not good for the economy because if groups are too far from each other, it generates social tension. And social tension evolves into conflict and war, and that's not very good because that decreases your GDP and your growth. But if I had to choose, it would be definitely poverty. But there is a trade-off. So when we first started these lectures, we said, so what is inequality? And all of you said poverty, no? Now we know it's different. Now we know poverty is not inequality and inequality is not poverty. But there is a trade-off, okay, between what you want. Ideally, there should be a steady state of some inequality and some poverty. And I was telling you when we started the lectures earlier today, we can think about a country such as Cuba, okay? And Cuba is not doing too bad, the education is really high, and there is equality, low inequality, but high poverty. One of the things that we're going to work on in the mini project is going to choose what would you like, a poor country or an unequal country. And it all depends on your preferences, correct? So I don't know, it's preference more than anything else. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And if I have to start from anything, I will reduce child labor. That would be my first wish ever.
Okay, thank you for the lecture. This question comes from my curiosity, and I haven't done any research about it, but about South Korea. Yeah. The education in South Korea is great. We know that women's education is great too. But now the problem of that country is the population growth that is decline. And you say that we know that women's education can redress the fertility and population growth. But now the population growth become one of the main problem of the South Korea. And is that, I'm just curious, is that some kind of trade-off from women education and what population growth?
It's not the only, women's education is not the only variable that is going to have an impact on fertility and population growth. Population growth is another, you hit it really well, because I went into human capital, okay? So that's what I was covering, so child labor and gender, but there are other things such as population and demographics, okay? And demographics also have an impact on poverty. So there is not a real trade-off between women's education and fertility. It's proven that it's going to reduce it, but it's a long-run type of thing. So think about Spain and Italy, for example. They have high levels of education in women, so fertility rates are low, are so low that are negative, okay? And that is also a problem, because who's going to look at the older aging population if there is no young people? If in average every Spanish woman has 0.5 children, not 1, 0.5. So it's an issue as well, okay? And this investment in education has an effect in the medium long run. It's not like in the short run. But I see your point. I see what you're saying about South Korea. But if you look at all the possibilities of all the population pyramids, you will see that some are healthy, some are not. All the old continent, like England and Spain and France and all that, have like, there are no pyramids. They're like, you know, they are like negative and they have an issue. All the countries like Sub-Saharan Africa, they have an explosion of fertility, and that's also a problem because child labor, right? So there is not a perfect answer, but one of the things that we need to consider is globalization. We're a team, we are the world, and we forget about it. And yes, we're different, but we're the same as well, and we live in the same place. And that's one of the reasons why the environment has to be not only how much you pollute here or there, you know. You probably are going to hear about, have you heard about pollution heavens? As much as there are financial heavens, there are also pollution heavens. So some of these countries that are doing very well in the HDI and they're super equal and super good and that, they go and dump all their rubbish into developing countries. You know? As if that's going to help them. We all live in the same world, no? There is going to be economic degradation anyway. But your question is difficult, but yes, there is no trade-off as such. So that's it. Any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Maria, for your presentation. It's really amazing. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bahira from the Economics major. I'm in my fourth semester now. And I want to ask you specifically about the Sub-Saharan Africa. So from your presentation, they present or they contribute the most to poverty levels, right? And from the article I read, one of their major problems in education is the shortage of teachers. And not only the number of teachers, but also their qualifications and their quality. And even until 2030, they said Sub-Saharan Africa needed 50 million more teachers to get universal access to education. So my question is, do you think it's better that Sub-Saharan Africa get help from outside in terms of giving that teacher number, or is it help from within their own country?
They cannot do it by themselves. They need external help, for sure, for sure. However, one of the nice things, if there was anything nice about COVID, was the opening of the classroom. So the classroom is not only the classroom. So you are here and it's great, and I really like teaching live. But there are lots of people on Zoom. Okay, so that is a good thing. In developing countries, they don't have a lot of internet, so it's not Zoom, but they have televised TV education. So students go and watch TV programs with a particular teacher, and that's how they gain access to education. So yes, they need a lot of investment. And we haven't mentioned the Gaza Strip of Palestine and Israel because we have to be careful. However, that is also a problem of that is going to have an impact on poverty. But Sub-Saharan Africa needs help, and needs help now. One of the estimates, and it relates to the question about demographics, is that it's estimated that by 2050 there is going to be a strong reduction of poverty in Sub-Saharan Africa. And this is due to foreign investment. Okay, so this is going to increase because it cannot go any higher. So that's a good estimate. And it has to do with the population pyramid because they're going to gain a momentum of growth. So the children now are young, but as soon as they are 20, they're going to produce a lot. and that's going to help for the GDP and everything. So that's an expectation, and we're waiting to see that happen. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. My name is Udi. I'm a student here at Management. Actually, I was kind of intrigued with others' question related to female access and inequality. I'm kind of wondering whether due to the inequal access and since they have a better education, somehow some women like prefer to delay their marriage and others probably like have a child-free option with their families so that they don't lose the opportunity to have a better career. Seems like we also talk about different pay. Yeah.
Yes, but also it has to do with free choice. Okay, so also men can decide to stay at home. It is an option. It's not a very popular option because it's hard. But there is it's a choice. It's like an utility function for all of those of you who do micro. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of tickled because like as we know, like our colleagues there, like only female has interest.
Yes.
Right. Like if they choose not to utilize the one they were gifted to, like this fertility definitely is gonna go down, and the sustainability of this humanity probably, I don't know, like for the next generation, it's gonna.
No, I think the world has perfectly survived with
I really.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of choice, you know, and the universe and the world has survived with women actually not choosing, but having to stay at home. So the matter that some proportion chooses to stay at home is not a big issue when they have the right to decide that. And men are also very well invited to stay at home if they wish to raise noisy kids.
Well, I mean, can I add to that issue, Maria? Because I think, yeah, this is also something that we learned in economics and population events. And well, yeah, you're right. Like choice is one thing, preference is one thing, but we know that in a model of preference, we have like constraint, right? So I think the question is how can we reduce the constraint so that we can like kind of nudge the preference? Like for example, in Indonesia, what we lacking because I'm in social protection kind of field. According to ILO, what we're lacking is black maternity benefits, one of which is maternity benefits, and we haven't yet had that paternity benefits or paternity leave. But if you compare that with other systems, like in more developed countries where they have not only maternity leave benefits, but they also have constructed this paternity leave benefit because, like Maria said, it's not only the responsibility of the female just because of we're the ones who are holding the babies for 9 months, right? It's even in the entire society, including the government, like how are they trying to kind of nudge that constraint so that, I mean, yeah, back again is a micro level preference, but I think it's more than the preference itself. But I don't know, yeah, maybe.
Yes, no, I agree. It's a preference, but somehow you can push preferences to one way or another. And rightly so, you're saying about paternity leave. Paternity leave is super important, and the proportion of people who the matter is that it exists. It doesn't matter how many people take it. It's how many people that it exists. That allows the choice. If you don't have the choice to stay, you might not take it. And in proportion, male don't take it as much. You know, it's a choice. It's fine. But the matter that exists helps the preferences. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, nothing else.
No, well, maybe because I just spoke. So I think I'm a disclaimer, Maria. I'm one of the scariest teachers that they always avoid my class. So yeah, I mean, I'm just adding to the discussion. So just imagine I'm not here. I'm nice. I'm fine. Delightful.
It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I will see you next week. So it's going to be the 14th. So we're going to carry on, and the mini project is there. You don't have to solve it, but if you, I know on Monday everybody's going to be doing nothing. So Monday is a good time for the mini project. You also have my email address. If you get stuck with anything, just let me know, and I'm happy to answer any questions by email. Okay? So it's very lovely to see you again today, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye. Thank you.